Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Fire and Ice podcast brought to you by Sportstopia. This is our Friday baseball show where we dig into the full slate of games with the help of Sportstopia's Contrarian Edge Optimizer and try to build some winning DFS baseball lineups. I'm Drew Silva. With me here is George Bissell. Welcome in, George. I feel like we have to address this at the top of the show. Chaim Bloom fired from his role as the Red Sox chief baseball officer, I believe was the title. That was on Thursday. I'm not surprised it came to an end in this manner, but the news also kind of like caught me off guard the way they did it, like in between, or actually it was before that doubleheader on Thursday. I wanted to get your feelings as a proud Nor'easter on that breaking news from yesterday.
So yeah, as our listeners may know, I'm from the New England area. I've lived here my whole life, and I can tell you that the last 4 years have been some of the strangest in Red Sox history because, first of all, Chaim Bloom takes over and is immediately tasked with trading one of the best players in franchise history, Mookie Betts, which you were never going to win that trade, but the return, I think, ended up being a lot more underwhelming than people thought, with Alex Verdugo on the precipice of free agency and really nothing else of significance coming out of that deal. I think people viewed his second season where the Red Sox were able to make a little bit of a run, make the playoffs, and they were competitive as a step in the right direction. Obviously, Chaim Bloom rebuilt the farm system into one of the best in baseball. And I think the sentiment locally was that Bloom was never willing to make the big deal. And we saw that at the trade deadline this year when the Red Sox were within striking distance of the postseason. They opted to kind of stand pat. And, they have options. They have guys, prospects they could have traded, like Blaze Jordan, somebody who's probably blocked at the major league level. And instead of dealing them for guys who could have helped, I think Bloom chose to stand pat. And the franchise has obviously chosen to go in a new direction. I think the writing was kind of on the wall. We started to hear rumblings a couple of weeks ago around here that there was something going on, that maybe the Red Sox were in on not necessarily David Stearns, but people like that they were kind of looking around when Mike Rizzo still hadn't signed his extension with the Nationals. So, yeah, I just think Bloom's tenure, I think it's going to be one of the most divisive in Red Sox history. I think there's people on both sides of the equation here.
Yeah, I mean, starting with the Betts trade and then the way that they've operated over the last few off seasons, over the last few trade deadlines, it felt like ownership was on board with what he was trying to do, kind of like a rolling rebuild style. That's why it kind of caught me off guard that it happened the way that it did, like during the season in mid-September. I felt like ownership was on board with what was going on. Like obviously they've needed pitching. They didn't get pitching. Some of these decisions are ownership calls, right? And certainly the Mookie Betts trade was. I don't know. The candidates to replace him are being discussed already internally and externally. Like Alex Cora, would he have interest in moving into a front office role from the manager's seat? Would the Red Sox want him to do that? They've had longtime interest in David Stearns, but the Mets did too, and recently hired him to run their front office. I've saw like there's betting sites that already have some odds for who's going to be the next head of baseball operations in Boston. Sam Fold, the Phillies' current general manager. Brandon Gomes has been talked about, the Dodgers GM and executive vice president. Cubs GM Carter Hawkins. Like it's definitely a marquee job despite the current ugly state of things at the major league level. Like you mentioned, the farm system has a lot of interesting players. And yeah, the new head of baseball operations doesn't have to carry the label of being the guy who traded Mookie Betts, though again, ownership signed off on that. Something that big is always in the end going to be ownership's call.
I think you're absolutely right that there was a mandate from ownership to cut spending, to kind of avoid those big long-term contracts and kind of ride things out and rebuild the farm system and build a sustainable winning model. The problem was the Red Sox weren't winning. We saw a lot of progress with guys like Jarren Duran. Tristan Casas has looked like a middle-of-the-order force. The Rafael Devers extension got done. So I think Bloom did a nice job of setting up the foundation. But when you look at it, guys like Roman Anthony are a long ways away. Marcelo Meyer is, hurt this year, and he's sort of the big lottery ticket for this franchise, where if he comes through and is a foundational player, that changes things. But I just think the lack of success at the major league level was ultimately what did Bloom in here. And like you mentioned, there's a lot of options for successors. I think Alex Cora has always talked about wanting to be in a front office role, but I don't know if it's the right time. It feels very
it's a weird time for that.
It feels very similar to when Theo Epstein left, almost 20 years ago now, where there was this weird transitional phase where the organization just kind of steered the ship and made, a couple moves without him there. I think the Hanley Ramirez deal was one of those where they traded for Josh Beckett. So we could see something like that where maybe ownership steps in and spends some money this offseason, but there isn't this, move, like there isn't like bringing Theo Epstein back or anything like that. I think you might see a real transitional phase here for the Red Sox.
Man, you just made me feel really old with it's been almost 20 years since Theo Epstein
I was
left
doing the math
Boston.
in my head. I was like, man, that was a while ago.
Yeah, that's scary. All right, let's get into the real meat of the show. First, running through a bunch of possible injury-related absences to keep an eye out for, and a little weather check for this Friday slate. George, you seen any trouble spots with the weather? It seems pretty clear, actually.
Well, yeah, that's the real encouraging thing because there aren't any trouble spots on the radar. We dealt with a lot of rainouts this week, including a costly one on Thursday night. The Giants and Rockies got rained out at Coors Field.
Yep.
Yankees and Red Sox had a pair of postponements earlier this week that led to 2 doubleheaders. So it's nice to see a pretty clear sheet from a radar standpoint here heading into Friday night. Jam-packed slate with 15 games. Everything's looking good on the weather front.
It is Friday morning, so things can change as we get into the afternoon and evening. But yeah, it looks like it's going to be free and clear for all these games to get in. Some injury concerns. Christian Yelich was on the bench for a 6th straight game Thursday as the Brewers wrapped up their series against the Marlins. The word is he keeps showing improvement. I think Milwaukee's just being cautious here with a nice, comfortable lead on the National League Central, but worth checking in on his status ahead of Friday's series opener against the Nationals. Shohei Ohtani continues to be listed as day-to-day. He's really almost like week to week with that oblique injury that has kept him out of action since September 3rd. It's been over 10 days. He also, of course, has the UCL issue in his elbow that may require surgery. A lot of unknowns with Ohtani right now as he prepares for his upcoming free agent bonanza. Maybe we'll get a clearer status update on him sometime today. Wilson Contreras, of Cardinals catcher, missed Wednesday's series finale at Baltimore after suffering a right hand contusion on Tuesday. He's a possibility to return to the Cardinals lineup following their scheduled team off day Thursday. Contreras has been really good. Maybe an under the radar second half. 344 batting average, 1057 OPS over his last 47 games, dating back to July 3rd. So hopefully he's able to return on Friday. Ryan Mountcastle, an MRI taken Thursday, was clean on his shoulder, no structural damage. Day to day, leading into the remainder of the Orioles' big 4-game series against the Rays. I could see Mountcastle being rested again on Friday just to be safe. Leody Taveras was scratched from the Rangers lineup in their Wednesday series finale, absent again for Thursday's series finale because of a sore left hand. It's not considered serious. He could return for Friday's series opener at Cleveland. Taveras has been really productive so far in September. That's why I mentioned him. If he's in there, he's a nice under the radar cheap play in DFS lineups. You got any others that stick out to you, George?
Yeah, so a couple. Brett Beatty's dealing with groin injury, his left groin soreness. MRI came back pretty clean, so he's day to day for now. If he were to miss time, Ronnie Mauricio, who's been out with an illness, would probably take over at third base. But looks like both of those guys are likely to come back this weekend. Mauricio definitely on Friday. Jazz Chisholm Jr., that's the big one that we don't have a lot of clarity on. He came out of Wednesday's game against the Brewers with right knee discomfort, didn't play Thursday, and we haven't gotten a clear update on what his status actually is. So fantasy managers should probably consider him day to day, but there's a chance he winds up missing games the rest of the week. So definitely something to monitor there. And then Mitch Garver came out of Thursday night's game with a left foot contusion. X-rays were negative, so didn't suffer a fracture, which is good news. And he should probably be day to day for now.
Michael Conforto, too. I'm going to mention him a little bit later, but he is set to return to the Giants' active roster and lineup Friday at Coors Field. That's definitely a game we're going to be talking about. We should note as well that the Braves clinched their 6th straight NL East title on Wednesday night or on Thursday. Yeah. I'm mixing up the days of the week.
This
They'll
week.
probably this week. But they'll probably throw out a hangover lineup Friday at Miami. There could be some regulars missing. They've started to already rest their regulars. Man, that was supposed to be a competitive division, the National League East, but Atlanta clinches on September 14th. They are a juggernaut going into the playoffs. All right, let's get into some lineup stacks here. You go first, George. Who's really sticking out to you? What team are you targeting to generate positive offensive numbers?
Well, I know you're going to go with the Giants against the
Yeah.
Rockies, so I'll go with another really favorable matchup here. I like the Houston Astros against the Kansas City Royals tonight. Obviously, with Zach Greinke pitching, he's had a really tough season. He's got a 1-15 record, which is not ideal. But he's given up a lot of home runs too. This season in 126 and 2/3 innings, he's given up 19 home runs, and the Astros are arguably one of the hottest lineups in baseball at the moment. So you got the big boys. You've got Altuve, Alvarez, Tucker, Bregman. I think those are guys you can kind of build around. And I like Chas McCormick and Yainer Diaz as options as well, a little lower cost that you could probably fit in as well. So that makes sense to me. I think they're going to do a lot of damage against Kansas City in this series, and it starts on Friday night.
As you mentioned, yeah, I'm going to run it back with the Giants after Thursday's series opener at Coors Field was postponed by inclement weather in Denver. Looks clearer there tonight. There's a 20% chance of rain around game time, but that's Denver weather. It changes rapidly. It's basically the same idea with this Giants team that I presented on Thursday's show. It's a must-win game. It's a must-win series for the Giants in a hitter-friendly environment at Coors Field. But like I said, this time we can add in the anticipated return of Michael Conforto, likely in the DH role after he missed the last 3 weeks or so with a grade 2 hamstring strain. Gabe Kapler said, the Giants manager said he was penciled into the lineup at DH for Thursday's game, but that lineup never actually came out prior to the early postponement announcement. So I'm going to put Conforto in there right away at the DH spot, or fit him into your lineup as an outfielder. I'll throw in Tyro Estrada in there too, Lamont Wade, Mike Yastrzemski. You could go very lefty heavy with this if you like, with the Rockies throwing right-hander Chase Anderson and his 6.49 season ERA. But I would just go ahead and stick to the Giants' most trustworthy hitters for this game in Colorado: Estrada, Wade, Conforto, Yastrzemski, and let it ride. They should make some noise for a team that woke up essentially tied with the Reds and Diamondbacks for the third National League wildcard spot. Miami's a half game back of those three. It's a bit of a mess on the NL side of that wild card situation. All those teams have their flaws, and you can punch a lot of holes in the depth chart. But it should be pretty fun down the stretch to see which of those teams actually make it into October.
Yeah, so that was the lineup
you
I
got a
picked.
second stack? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so that was actually the lineup I picked for the Sportstopia Friday lineup stack article that's actually up on the website right now. So I hit on all those lefties like you mentioned. I think if you look at the Fantasy Sports Logic's Contrarian Edge Optimizer, that's one of the ideal lineup builds. It's just to stack those three Giants outfielders and build around that. And then Estrada's in there as well. So that's definitely one of the preferred ways to go tonight to get that edge for fantasy managers. So another one I like is let me take a look here. I'm gonna grab my notes. The Cubs against the Diamondbacks. The thing with that matchup is Brandon Pfaadt has given up a lot of home runs this season. He's given up 20 home runs in just 80 and 2/3 innings and 15 starts.
Yeah, that's rough.
I mean, that's a lot. So the Cubs don't have a ton of left-handed batters that can do damage. I think Cody Bellinger is the obvious name here. He's a little costlier than some of the other options at outfield, but I think he's got a decent shot here, having the best season of his career, a resurgent year, heading into free agency coming up. So I think he's got a shot to do some damage tonight. And the rest of that lineup, guys like Christopher Morel, they can get hot. Seiya Suzuki's been seeing the ball well of late. So there's definitely some options there for fantasy managers. And that game's in Arizona. So I really like the NL West sort of stacks here tonight. I think you can build some really strong lineups around those two games.
Yeah, Brandon Pfaadt arrived in the majors this year with a lot of, prospect hype. He was, I think, the minor league strikeouts leader last year, had 218 of them in 167 innings, but like he has not passed the eye test for me. I've talked about this with Chris Crawford, who works with us here at Sportstopia. Like a lot of times when you see big strikeout totals in the minors and the stuff doesn't really match that, like the scouting levels of his arsenal doesn't really match that, it's because of deception. And I think he relied on a lot of deception in the minors that doesn't necessarily work in the majors. I think he can be like a fine mid-tier starter long term, but I don't think he's like an elite pitching prospect. And
Yeah.
we've kind of seen that so far this year.
No, obviously, I trust Chris's opinions on prospects more than probably anybody out there. And, the
Yeah.
name that comes to mind for me is like a throwback name, Tony Cingrani. Remember? He had those
Yeah.
colossal minor league strikeout numbers and then just couldn't really hack it as a starter. So you see guys like this. Jarrell Cotton was another one who had those just astronomical minor league strikeout numbers, and the changeup just never really translated against big league
Yep.
hitters. So I think you see that a lot, and that might be the case here. And when he's missing his spots, he's getting absolutely hammered right now. So
Yep.
Arizona, they have to keep giving him starts, but he has not had success early on.
Yeah, the Diamondbacks need a win. The Cubs need a win. That's going to be a really interesting series there. My other stack on this Friday slate is the Padres at Athletics. It's been a highly disappointing season for the Padres, obviously. Maybe the most disappointing of all teams. The Mets, Yankees, Red Sox, Cardinals fan bases might disagree, but it's been brutal for this year for the Padres, given what they put in to that payroll, what they put into that team. They got very aggressive and it just hasn't really clicked at all. But hey, they're going out to Oakland to play essentially a double A team this weekend, and the Bats should make some noise against that A's pitching staff. This is a pricier stack than my Giants one because you want to go with the big boppers in this lineup. Fernando Tatis Jr., Manny Machado, Ha-Seong Kim has been terrific for fantasy scoring with all of his extra base hits and stolen bases. Definitely throw him in there. Luis Campusano to fill out your catcher spot. I threw in Ha-Seong Kim's name into my Google search bar this morning just to see if there was like any overnight news I wasn't aware of. And there's this website in South Korea that seems to think that he might be dating Taylor Swift. Um, they've been I spent some time this morning actually digging into this. They've been quietly hanging out, according to this one Twitter account from South Korea. There's no evidence of that at all. There's not even a picture of them in the same city.
Is this like the Mitch White, Margot Robbie thing from a few months ago? Remember that one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That could be. I think this is even to a greater degree. But yeah, that's the internet for you in 2023. As I'm looking up Ha-Seong Kim's stats, I get that he's dating Taylor Swift. The internet's really doing well these days, George. It's really thriving. Anyway, yeah, I like the Padres to at least not embarrass themselves this weekend at Oakland like they've embarrassed themselves a lot this year. I think they're going to have a big outburst throughout the weekend. I hope it starts on Friday, facing off against Sean Newcomb in this one, who is, pitched well, but he's mostly been a reliever at the big league level throughout his career. He's a lefty. I think go ahead and stack all of the best Padres who swing right-handed. That's my advice for that one.
I might end up being wrong, but I actually kind of like Sean Newcomb in this spot. Look, he's pitched well. He had 4 shutout innings his last time out. Has actually performed pretty well since arriving in Oakland. He's got an ERA under 1 in 12 innings. I know it's a small sample size, but I think their bullpen's a little bit better than people give it credit to. And they did a decent job against the Astros. So yeah, I think it's one or the other. Either they're going to go out there and get absolutely demolished, or they're actually going to pitch well. I don't think there's like a median outcome here. So it's one or the other. One of us is going to be right, but I think I could see both sides of the coin in that matchup.
Well, yeah, I mean, when you're building DFS lineups, you want contrarian plays, and Sean Newcomb would certainly be a contrarian play in this one. So I can't really bash it. That's a good segue into our starting pitchers that we should recommend for this Friday slate. There's a lot to choose from. I'll start first. Hunter Green at the Mets. The Mets have sort of embraced the spoiler role, coming off 3 straight fairly dominant wins over the Diamondbacks. So the matchup does kind of worry me a little bit, but Green is reasonably priced on most DFS services relative to the strikeouts upside that we know he can provide. He had 9 Ks in 6 innings last time out against my Cardinals. He gave up only 1 unearned run, got his pitch count in that one up to 109. So he can work deep Friday in Queens in a must-win game, must-win series for the Reds, giving us a lot of swing and miss potential. There have been a couple of blow-ups since he returned August 20th from what was it was a 2-month absence to heal a hip injury. But Green's last 2 outings have been really good, and hopefully he can keep right on that track Friday against the Mets as Cincinnati tries to pad its resume for an NL wildcard spot. Green has 123 strikeouts in 91 and a third innings this season. That's the kind of stuff we want to see, and hopefully the run prevention falls in line and he gets a chance at a win pitching deep into that game at Citi Field.
Certainly a high variance guy, and with the strikeout
Yeah,
upside, he's the type of building block I can see going with. I wrote about this for the Sportstopia Friday lineup stack article that, you know, there's not a ton of great pitching options on this slate. I mean, there's not a lot of elite guys going tonight.
that's true.
So I think Justin Steele is kind of the clear building block for me. He's probably the he might not win it. I think Blake Snell kind of wrapped it up with his last outing, but he's going to be in the conversation. He's going to be a finalist for the NL Cy Young Award, and he's pitched phenomenally this season. He's allowed 3 earned runs or fewer in 25 of his 27 starts, and the strikeouts have been there. He's averaged a strikeout per inning at 159 through 159 innings. So it's a good matchup against Arizona, and like we said, I think the Cubs can get him a lot of run support in this one, and with how well he's pitched, I think he's got a decent shot at coming away with a win here on Friday night. So he's one of the more expensive options, but I think he's arguably the safest of anybody out there.
Yeah, the NL Cy Young odds as of this morning, this kind of caught me off guard, but on FanDuel Sportsbook at least, Blake Snell minus 170. He was a bigger favorite than that not too long ago. Justin Steele plus 155. So he's actually really closed the gap. I mean, they each have at least 2 turns left. That could swing. Zach Gallen at plus 750. He is faded a bit. Spencer Strider at plus 12,000. If you really want to throw a dart, but his ERA is a little bit too high. Certainly has the strikeouts, but the ERA is not at the level of the other guys.
I'm always fascinated to see those ballots because I think Strider's going to get more votes than we think from especially the people who look at more than just the surface stats. He's had a real incredible season.
Yeah, I agree. I think he could actually even finish second, but it's probably Snell's award. And like maybe just because of the strikeouts and because of the name recognition and because of what the Braves have done this year, that puts Strider into like, I wish you could bet on who's going to finish second rather than who's going to win the award. My other starting pitcher that I'm going to recommend is Tarik Skubal at the Angels. And Skubal's price has risen on DFS services, and rightly so. He's generally looked better than ever since missing the first 3 months of the season following flexor tendon surgery. He got blown up by the Royals of all teams back in July, but has otherwise been solid to excellent in every other one of his starts. Overall, a 3.47 ERA, 1.02 whip, 75 strikeouts, only 13 walks in 62 and a third innings. He had 9 strikeouts over 5 scoreless innings last weekend against the Tigers, only 2 hits allowed, just 1 walk. Pitch count in that one was 95. He can work late into the game at Angel Stadium tonight with a good number of Ks against an Angels team that seems to be lacking a rudder. They optioned Kyron Paris and Jordan Adams to AAA Salt Lake on Thursday, brought back Jared Walsh and David Fletcher, who they had DFA'd both of those guys, pushed them off the 40-man roster. So, like, I don't know, it was a youth movement in Anaheim. Now I don't know what the heck they're doing. I don't think those were necessarily positive moves in terms of building a better lineup for this weekend. Mike Trout could be in for some shutdown news here in the near future because of that lingering wrist discomfort. There's talk of Trout being a trade candidate this winter. Shohei Ohtani, as we mentioned at the top of the show, could be out again and facing an early shutdown as well. Things are not in a good place in Anaheim, and I don't expect Skubal and the Tigers to feel sorry for them. I think he cruises and maybe even dominates Friday night at Angel Stadium. His price has risen, but I think I'd be willing to pay up for it against whatever's going on with that Angels team.
Yeah, Skubal's had at least 7 strikeouts in 5 consecutive starts since August 18th. So this is the type of, matchup that he can excel in. So
yeah. Let's get into some. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to mention real quick on the pitching side. I already talked about Sean Newcomb, but the Fantasy Sports Logic's Contrarian Edge Optimizer really likes Logan Webb tonight in Colorado. I again, like on paper, it doesn't look like a great matchup, but because of that, his price is actually lower, and the optimizer actually really likes Logan Webb tonight. So that's just something to keep in mind. I'd look at that.
Yeah, and an extra day of rest because he was supposed to pitch Thursday.
Yep.
And like and the postponement announcement came in well before. Like I said, the Giants didn't even put out a lineup, so he didn't like have to warm up and then stop. Like he should be in a really good place physically, at least to dominate a Rockies lineup that is usually good at home, but hasn't been good at home, hasn't been good
Right.
anywhere this year
Yeah.
at sea
Yep.
level or in the Rocky Mountains. Some optimizer picks that stick out to me as you generate lineups on the Fantasy Sports Logic Contrarian Edge Optimizer. Garrett Cooper, you can make him part of the Padres stack that I laid out earlier, or use him independently as a cheap option at first base. He's in a bit of a slump right now, but I think capable of getting back on track against the A's and the aforementioned Sean Newcomb, who we like and we don't like. The Twins, Max Kepler, I think sticks out, a left-handed slugger going against White Sox right-hander Jesse Schultens. Kepler has an 813 OPS with 18 home runs and 350 plate appearances this year against righties. I definitely consider Royce Lewis. He is a bit pricier. See if Willie Castro is in the lineup. He's got some dynamic talent, can get on base and steal some bases and put in some runs scored. Robbie Grossman, another cheap outfield option as the Rangers take on Lucas Giolito in Cleveland. Grossman's 8 for 17 with 2 homers and 8 RBIs over his last 6 games. Any value plays that are sticking out to you?
Yeah, I think like you mentioned with Royce Lewis, he's been really hot of late. His homer in his last couple of games. That's actually a really nice matchup for the Twins. They get
Yeah.
the White Sox, who they're starting Jesse Schultens, who's really struggled of late. And they burned through a lot of their bullpen last night. So I think the Twins could score a ton of runs in this game. They're still competing for that division title there. That's a good spot if you want to stack Twins hitters. Alex Kirilloff's another guy who's very cheap
Yep.
on tonight's slate. He makes sense at first base. So those are a couple options that stand out to me that I really like on that side.
Yeah, the optimizer likes some cheap Guardians bats going against right-hander John Gray and the Rangers. Bo Naylor, Will Brennan. I don't love it, but the optimizer does. It likes some Diamondbacks as well going against your guy Justin Steele, Christian Walker, of course Corbin Carroll. If you can fit him into a lineup, I don't care who the Diamondbacks are facing. I try to fit him in. Jared Kelnick, the optimizer, likes him as the Mariners take on the Dodgers and right-hander Bobby Miller. It could be a sneaky good play if he's in Seattle's lineup. Kelnick has been battling some soreness in his surgically repaired foot. It's being downplayed as a normal thing, but worth keeping an eye out on that. All right, I think that's going to do it for this Friday edition of the Fantasy Fire and Ice podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for joining me, George, and good luck, everybody.